What if the whispers of the Silk Road are more than just the ghosts of merchants long since dust? What if each cobblestone holds a tale that could unravel your sanity? Welcome to the dark heart of trade routes, where the air is thick with desperation, and trust is a commodity more scarce than gold. Picture this: you're not just a traveler, you're a pawn in a game of life and death, where every smile hides a blade, and every handshake could seal your fate. The skies are choked with the cries of caravans, each one a ticking time bomb of treachery. The Silk Road, the legendary artery of commerce, wasn't just paved with silk and spices. No, it was soaked in blood, betrayal, and unspeakable secrets that would make a modern cartel look like child's play. Think you could barter your way to fortune? Think again. Merchants with eyes like daggers will sell you a counterfeit promise before you can say silk shawl. You stumble into a world where greed is the law, and those who can't keep up are left to the vultures and the sands. You'll find yourself yearning for the comfort of a Starbucks as you choke on the dust of 1,000 lost dreams. And what of the bandits? The spectre of danger lurks in every shadow, no neon lights flicker to warn you here. The nomads are not your friendly neighborhood delivery men, they're ruthless, cunning, and hungry for your last coin. One moment, you're swapping tales over tea, the next, you're staring down the barrel of a crossbow, unsure if your instincts are quicker than your luck. But let's not forget the vendors, those slick-tongued serpents with wares that shine brighter than the truth. They'll spin yarns that would make your grandma's tall tales sound like bedtime stories. This spice will cure what ails you, they declare, while you wonder if it's more likely to bring you riches or ruin. Every decision becomes a gamble. Are you betting on your survival or your sanity? The Silk Road is a labyrinth of contradictions, an epic where the line between fortune and folly blurs like the horizon at dusk. As the sun dips behind the dunes, shadows elongate, creeping closer to your soul. This isn't a quaint holiday, it's a twisted carnival of chaos where life's greatest lessons are taught in blood-red ink. So, can you feel it? The pulse of history thrumming in your veins? The electrifying thrill of danger that tingles at the nape of your neck? Buckle up, because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a survival guide. Forget the oblivious tourists wandering around with their selfie sticks, this is a life-or-death puzzle waiting for a brave soul to take the plunge. You think you can handle it? Think again. In the end, you'll learn one undeniable truth: the Silk Road doesn't just test your mettle, it devours the weak whole, leaving behind only echoes of those who dared to dream. Can you hear them? The wind howled through the jagged peaks like a mournful wail, a haunting symphony that echoed the heartbeats of those who dared to tread the treacherous paths. I stood there, the chill biting at my skin, the scent of earth and stone mingling with the spice of distant lands. Above me, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, a prelude to the shadows creeping along the mountains. It was here, at the cusp of civilization and wilderness, that the world began to shift, where the fates of countless souls intertwined, each thread a story, each story a breath. I remember the first time I met Cai, eyes wide like the sky, cheeks dusted with the remnants of his childhood. He was a mere boy then, clutching a handful of silk, its softness betraying the harsh reality of his life, a life that would soon become a canvas of struggle and ambition. Silk, he whispered, as if revealing the very essence of the cosmos, is born from dreams. His hands trembled, and I could see it in his eyes. He longed for more than this desolate village, for more than the shackles of his father's trade. Yet, destiny had a way of weaving dreams into nightmares, and little did he know, he was destined for a path riddled with obstacles. Then there was Layla. Fierce and untamed, she was a flame in a tempest, a daughter of merchants with a heart that beat for freedom. What is a trade route but a chain, she would challenge, her voice a melody of defiance that sent chills through the air. She spoke of the cities she had never seen, the spices and treasures that lay beyond the horizon. Her laughter rang like a bell, bright and clear, but behind it, I caught the shadows, the ghosts of her ancestors who had risked everything for a chance to carve their names into the annals of history. The stories whispered in the dark of night were not mere fantasies, they were the very fabric of existence. The Silk Road, they said, was born from the ashes of ambition and greed, a lifeline stretching from the heart of the East to the grandeur of the West, binding cultures like a delicate thread. But beneath that beauty lay treachery. I could feel it in my bones, the pulse of an ancient curse, trade was a double-edged sword, and blood always demanded a price. Cai and Layla's lives began to entwine, each step they took a note in the symphony of fate. One fateful evening, as the stars spilled across the sky like a silken cloak, Cai set out to sell his father's wares, fragile treasures that would never carry the weight of his dreams. The world was vast, and he was but a small player in a game where kings and bandits danced hand in hand. I remember the way Layla watched him leave, her heart a fragile bird trapped in a cage. "Promise me you'll return," she called, her voice quivering with the weight of unspoken words. But promises, much like silk, can fray and unravel. Days turned into weeks, and whispers of conflict began to seep into the fabric of their world. Merchants were ambushed, and caravans vanished like smoke in the wind. Cai's eyes hardened with determination. He would not let fear dictate his path. "I will find a way," he declared, a fire igniting in his chest. He would travel the Silk Road, a path paved with peril, but he saw it as the only way to grasp his dreams. As Cai traversed the landscapes of uncertainty, I felt the tension crackle in the air. Each step was a heartbeat, each heartbeat a story, his journey laden with the weight of 1,000 hopes and fears, a fragile thread connecting him to Layla, to his family, to the very essence of life itself. But every road is lined with choices, and every choice births consequences. Layla, desperate to escape the confines of her life, hatched a plan. She would find him, she would break the chains that bound her, and together they would carve their names into the history of the Silk Road. But the world was a merciless judge, it would test their hearts and souls. On a starless night, I remember the moment everything shifted, the clash of metal against metal, the screams that pierced the dark. Cai found himself surrounded by shadows, bandits hungry for blood and gold, their eyes glinting with the promise of chaos. "What is worth more than a life?" one snarled, brandishing a dagger that gleamed cruelly in the moonlight. In that moment, Cai stood at the precipice of despair, the weight of his dreams pressing down upon him like a stone. Hours felt like centuries as he fought, every swing of his arm a desperate plea for survival, for a future that felt more like a mirage than reality. I could feel Layla's heart racing, her determination coiling around her like a protective shield. She was coming for him, a tempest of fury and love. The Silk Road, a lifeline of trade, had transformed into a battleground of choices, a place where love and ambition clashed in a cacophony of desperation. As Cai faced the darkness, I remembered the whispers of the ancients, their dreams woven into the very fabric of the land, a reminder that every thread carried a burden, an unfulfilled promise. Cai's breath hitched as he saw a figure emerge from the shadows, Layla, fierce and unyielding, fighting her way through the chaos with the strength of 1,000 warriors. Time seemed to freeze as their eyes met, and in that fleeting moment, the world melted away. Their pain, their struggles, their dreams, all laid bare. But the road was fraught with challenges, and the confrontation that loomed was only the beginning. In the heart of battle, I felt the pulse of history, the birth of trade routes that would span centuries, connecting not just lands, but souls. The Silk Road was not merely a collection of paths, it was a living entity, breathing hope and despair in equal measure. And as I stood there, the wind howling its mournful tune, I knew this was just the beginning. The echoes of their struggles would resonate through time, weaving a tapestry that would forever change the world, a fragile yet unbreakable bond forged in the fires of hardship and heartache. The Silk Road would rise, not just as a trade route, but as a testament to the enduring spirit of humanity, a lifeline that would carry stories of love, ambition, and the pursuit of dreams, eternally intertwining destinies across continents. The darkness lingered, a promise of what was to come. And in that eerie silence, I felt the weight of their journey press upon my soul, a haunting melody that would never fade. The wind howled like a wounded animal, a chilling whisper that crawled beneath the skin and coiled around the heart. I stood at the edge of the precipice, where the earth broke away into jagged cliffs that kissed the endless abyss below. My breaths came fast, quick bursts of panic mixing with the icy air. I could feel the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on me, a heavy shroud of uncertainty that trapped my lungs. It was here, in this merciless landscape, that my world would either shatter or be reborn. Is it still behind us? Whispered Ilara, her voice trembling as she clutched the frayed edges of her cloak, the fabric worn thin from too many nights exposed to the wrath of the elements. Her eyes darted, wide and glassy, scanning the shadows that danced in the fading light. I could see the fear etched across her face, the deep lines of worry that had carved themselves into her youthful features. She was just a girl who had learned too soon that the world was relentless and cruel. I don't know, I replied, voice barely a whisper, as if speaking louder could summon the darkness. My heart raced, not just from the cold gnawing at my bones, but from the memories clawing their way to the surface. I remember the fireside tales, the elders' voices thick with warning as they spoke of the treachery lurking in every corner of the valley, of storms that could sweep away the strongest souls. But they never told us about this, about the suffocating silence that followed, how the very air felt charged with dread. A crack echoed in the distance, a sound that could shatter the brittle peace of a starless night. I turned, instinctively reaching for Ilara's hand, squeezing it like a lifeline. Behind us stood Riven, his silhouette outlined against the darkening sky. He was our protector, or at least that's what we had longed to believe. But I saw the cracks in his facade, the flicker of doubt in his eyes that he tried desperately to mask. He was a soldier, once proud and unyielding, now just a man fighting against the weight of his own failures. Keep moving, he barked, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. His gaze flickered past us, searching the horizon as if it might offer a reprieve from the growing threat. I knew he was haunted by the ghosts of his past, memories of battles lost and comrades fallen, their faces forever blurring into the shadows that taunted him. He had led us into this wasteland, but with each step deeper into the wild, I could see him grappling with regret. Riven! I shouted, desperation hardening my tone. We can't keep running blindly. We need to find shelter. The words hung heavy in the air, an undeniable truth we all felt but dared not voice. The night was alive, a living organism that pulsed with unseen dangers, and we were mere prey in its unforgiving grasp. I remember the stories of those who faced this terrain, I said, the memory flooding back with vivid clarity. I recalled a tale of a traveler who had once braved these lands, only to be swallowed by the earth itself, an endless pit of darkness that offered no escape. They were consumed by the very ground they walked on. Ilara's grip on my hand tightened, and I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. We're not them, Riven said, though his voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. We have each other. We are stronger together. But I could feel the fissures in his resolve, the cracks deepening with every word, and I feared that togetherness might not be enough. The howling wind picked up, slashing at our skin, a cold reminder of nature's indifference. I shivered, a visceral reaction not just to the temperature but to the realization of how fragile our existence truly was. We were bound by fear, by a desperation that clawed at our throats, yet I could see a flicker of something deeper in Ilara's eyes, a spark of resilience. She was a force of nature herself, a reminder that hope could exist amid despair. Ahead, she said suddenly, pointing toward a dark shape looming in the distance, a cave, perhaps. We have to get to it. Her voice was raw, but there was determination in it, a glimmer of strength that urged us on. Stay close, Riven instructed, his resolve momentarily reignited. We move as one. With each step, the ground beneath us shifted, the terrain unforgiving, jagged stones jutting out like teeth eager to bite. I stumbled, nearly losing my footing, but Ilara's hand was there, steadying me. An anchor in this storm of chaos. The cave loomed larger, an opening in the side of the cliff that breathed darkness and dread. I could feel the air shift, a palpable energy swirling around us, heavy with anticipation. And I knew, deep down, I knew, that what lay inside would challenge us in ways we could not yet comprehend. I remembered tales of those who had entered caves only to emerge changed forever, their souls fractured, altered by the darkness they had confronted. We reached the entrance, and I hesitated, the shadow swallowing me whole. It felt like stepping into a nightmare, the kind that lingers long after waking, the kind that gnaws at the edges of your sanity. The darkness inside was thick, a tangible force that pressed against our chests, making it hard to breathe. I turned to Ilara, her face illuminated by the faint glow of moonlight filtering through, and I saw the flicker of fear, the same fear that coursed through me, binding us together in this moment of vulnerability. Are you ready? I asked, my voice cracking under the weight of the question. But it was more than a question of readiness, it was an acknowledgement of the dangers we faced, not just outside but within ourselves. She nodded, her resolve hardening. Together, she breathed, and in that moment, I understood. We were not just travelers in this wretched land, we were warriors, fighting against the very geography of danger that sought to consume us. Each step into the cave echoed with uncertainty, each heartbeat a reminder of the struggle that lay ahead. And as we crossed the threshold, a new reality enveloped us, one that blurred the lines between fear and hope. The shadows writhed and danced, and I could feel the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, a warning that the true battle was just beginning. The stench of burnt flesh mingled with the spicy scent of saffron as shadows flickered in the flickering lantern light. I stood there, the world a whirl of chaos and fear, my heart pounding like a war drum. Around me, voices rose in a cacophony, some pleading, others shouting, the air thick with desperation. In the distance, a figure stumbled, clothes torn, eyes wild with terror, their words lost in the turmoil, but the terror echoed in their gaze. I couldn't look away, it was a mirror, reflecting my own panic, my own dread. I remember the first time I felt this too. On a dusty road in the heart of the Silk Road, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows of merchants and travelers. There was Amina, a trader's daughter with a spirit as fierce as the desert sun, her laughter ringing bright against the muted tones of the world around us. She was a tapestry of contradictions, bold yet fragile, a warrior with a heart that bled for the strangers passing through her life. She would tell tales of the city of Samarkand, vibrant and alive, where the walls whispered stories of longing and loss. But today, in this moment, her voice was swallowed by the chaos. Why must it always end like this? She cried, her hands trembling, clutching the remnants of a silk scarf, a symbol of her heritage and history, now stained with ash. Why can't they see we are all just trying to survive? And there was Farouk, a merchant whose dreams were entwined with the spices he carried. He stood there, torn between two worlds, one anchored in tradition and the other yearning for change. I watched him, his brow furrowed, a storm brewing in his chest. Amina, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, we are too different. They will never understand. His words were like arrows, piercing the fragile hope that fluttered in the air between them. But the world outside was relentless. A group of armed men approached, their intentions veiled in the shadows of their faces. They wanted answers, and answers were never free. The ground felt unsteady beneath my feet, and I could almost hear the clock ticking, each second a reminder that time was running out. It was unfair, the lives woven into this tapestry, so vibrant, yet so easily unraveled by misunderstanding. Stand back! Amina shouted, her voice rising above the din as she stepped forward, defiant. We have no quarrel with you. Her courage was a beacon in the night, but it was also a reckless flame, flickering in the wind. I felt the weight of her words, the desperation coiling in my stomach. Here, in this moment, we were all caught in the web of history, each thread taut with the risk of rupture. I remember the stories my father told me about the Silk Road, a thread connecting hearts and cultures, yet also a battlefield where misunderstandings ignited flames of hatred. You don't understand. I wanted to scream, to shake the men approaching, to make them see the shared humanity lingering just beneath the surface of our differences. But my voice faltered, drowned in the swell of fear and anger. Amina's eyes met mine, and in that fleeting moment, I felt an unbreakable bond, the knowledge that we were all just pilgrims on this road, searching for a place to rest our weary souls. The men halted, their eyes scanning the scene, searching for a threat, a reason to unleash the chaos that danced just outside their restraint. Farouk stepped forward, hands raised, palms open, as if he could physically bridge the chasm of misunderstanding. We are traders. We seek only peace. But what is peace in a world that thrives on conflict? What are words in the face of fear? I could feel the air thickening, electric with tension, the watchful shadows growing denser around us. The silence fell, thick, suffocating, and in that moment, I realized how fragile our threads were. Each culture along this road was like a delicate silk thread, vibrant yet vulnerable, susceptible to the slightest snag. I could feel the pulse of the moment, the heartbeat of history echoing around us, reminding me that this wasn't just about us, it was about every traveler who had walked this path, every soul who had faced conflict and misunderstanding, the ghosts of those who had fallen along the way. In the stillness, Amina took a deep breath, her resolve like steel. "We can learn from each other," she said, her voice carrying a fierce hope. "There is beauty in diversity, in sharing what we have instead of fighting for what we want." But would they listen? Would they see her heart, so open and raw, or would they turn away, dismissing her words as weakness? I felt the walls closing in, the tension spiraling as the men whispered amongst themselves, their eyes flashing with uncertainty. And I knew, right then, that this was a crossroads, a moment that could lead to healing or destruction, a choice that could shift the course of history forever. The flickering lanterns cast eerie shadows that danced like specters, and the air shimmered with the weight of countless unspoken words. In the depths of my being, I felt the tremors of something monumental, the knowledge that we were at the cusp of a transformation, if only we could hold on to each other, to our shared humanity, long enough to bridge this chasm that threatened to engulf us. Time stood still, and in that eerie silence, I realized, this was not just a tale of the Silk Road, it was a mirror reflecting our struggles, our hopes, our fears. We were all travelers, navigating the tangled web of culture and conflict, and just beyond that veil lay a deeper understanding, if only we dared to reach for it. As the moment stretched into eternity, the echoes of the past whispered in my ears, reminding me of the lessons learned and forgotten. And, just like that, the shadows deepened, holding us in their embrace, waiting to see if we would stand together or let the misunderstandings divide us forever. The air was thick with anticipation, and I could feel it, it was only just beginning. The marketplace roared like a beast awakened, its cries a cacophony of desperation and greed. Carts creaked under the weight of spices and silks, their vibrant colors bleeding into the dusty streets. A foul stench hung in the air, sweat and desperation mingled with the sweet notes of cinnamon as merchants shouted prices like curses, each word a blade slicing through the haze. The sun beat down mercilessly, an indifferent witness to the human struggle unfolding below. I was there, caught in the whirlwind of it all, each heartbeat a drumbeat of chaos, echoing through the alleyways of my mind. I remember the first time I met Ilara. Her hands moved with the grace of a dancer, bartering with a merchant whose eyes were as sharp as daggers, wanting more than he was letting on. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the fire in her spirit that drew me in, her desperation to escape her past, to forge her own destiny in a world that sought to chain her. Her laughter, sharp and ringing, contrasted with the dark shadows lurking in the corners of the market. But even as I stole glances at her, I felt the weight of my own burdens pressing down, like an anchor anchored to my heart. I was a traveler, a fool with nothing but a pocket full of dreams and a head full of regrets. My name? It hardly matters. In the grand scheme of trade and currency, I was but a fleeting wisp, a ghost desperately chasing shadows. I remember how I once stumbled upon a crumbling ledger in a forgotten corner of the marketplace, its pages filled with numbers and scrawls that danced before my eyes. Every figure a heartbeat lost, every transaction a life traded for a handful of coins. It made me shudder, thinking of the lives caught in this relentless cycle, the merchants and the travelers, forever entwined in this dance. And then there was Anton, a merchant whose eyes glinted with ambition. He stood tall, a mountain of a man, but beneath the surface, the vulnerability was palpable. I watched him from the shadows, the flickering candlelight reflecting off the coins he counted with trembling fingers. He was in debt to the wrong people, shadowy figures whose whispers clung to the back alleys like ghosts. I saw it in the way he gripped the coins, they were life to him, yet also a noose tightening around his neck. Each transaction felt like a gamble, a roll of the dice that could either save him or send him spiraling into the abyss. Trade is blood and sweat, he once muttered, bitterly. It's love and hate, a dance of greed. You want to survive, you must be willing to step on throats. I couldn't understand his world of profit and loss, not as I stood there, clutching my dreams like fragile glass. But with every word he spoke, I felt the pulse of the marketplace, a rhythm that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Ilara and Anton were drawn to each other, two moths dancing around the same flame. Their dreams intertwined like the twisting paths of the market, filled with the promise of wealth but shrouded in uncertainty. They whispered of distant lands, of riches beyond measure, but there was a darkness in their ambition, an insatiable hunger for more, more, more. I remember a night when the stars blinked like secrets overhead, and the three of us gathered beneath the flickering lanterns. Ilara spoke of a place where currency was replaced by trust, where love bore more weight than gold. Her words hung in the air, heavy and sweet like honey, but behind her eyes, I saw the flicker of doubt, the gnawing fear of the unknown. "Can you imagine?" she asked, her voice a melodic dare. "A world where we trade stories instead of coins? Where the weight of our hearts is more valuable than gold?" And in that moment, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to escape the suffocating reality, to shed the chains of currency that bound us all. But the marketplace had its own rules, an unyielding grip that would not let us go. I felt the tension in the air, a boiling pot of dreams and desperation, each of us standing on the precipice of a decision that could change everything. As dawn broke, a chill swept through the market, a warning that lingered, heavy and palpable. The whispers of betrayal danced like shadows, cloaked figures lurking on the periphery, eyes glinting with malice. Anton's debts had come calling, and I watched helplessly as the weight of his ambition turned into a noose. The clash of metal against metal rang out, a sound that cut through the air like a scream. Ilara's eyes widened, and for a moment, the world fell silent, as if the universe held its breath. "Run!" I screamed, the word tearing from my throat like a lifeline thrown into the abyss. But how could we run when our feet were anchored to the ground? When the very air we breathed was saturated with fear and longing? The marketplace erupted into chaos, a frenzy of bodies colliding, fear spilling into desperation. I felt the pulse of the crowd, the wild energy of survival, and yet I was trapped in my head, a prisoner of my own dreams. As Ilara and Anton were swept away, I stood frozen, the world around me a blur. I could hear their voices mingling in the chaos, the broken promises and shattered dreams thrown into the fray. "Trade is blood and sweat," Anton had said, "but what about love? What about the human connection that thrummed beneath the surface of every transaction?" I remember standing there, my heart racing, the weight of the world pressing down on my chest. The marketplace, my prison, buzzed with life and death, a reminder that we were all mere players in this brutal game. But as dawn broke, the shadows whispered promises of change, and I realized the dance was far from over. The economic forces at play were relentless, and somewhere in the chaos, hope flickered like a dying flame, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, we are all searching for a way to break free, to find our place in a world that often feels so impossibly vast. A piercing scream shattered the dusk, slicing through the thick air like a knife. It came from just beyond the flickering campfire, where shadows danced like wraiths among the trees. I could feel the chaos rising in my throat, a bitter taste of fear that mingled with the scent of damp earth and dying embers. My heart pounded like a war drum, every beat reverberating with dread. The night was alive, crackling with tension, and I wasn't alone. There was Ilara, crouched low near the fire, her eyes wide, reflecting the flames. She was brave, or maybe foolish, wielding a dagger with a trembling grip. "Get the horses," she shouted, voice sharp as the blade in her hand. But I couldn't move. My feet felt glued to the ground, rooted in a soil that seemed to breathe and pulse with the terror gathering around us. "What if they come for us?" I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips, thick with the weight of impending doom. "They will," a voice croaked from behind me. It was old man Garrick, leaning heavily on a gnarled staff, his face a mask of years spent in the shadows of uncertainty. "They always do." His words slithered into my gut, coiling there like a serpent ready to strike. Who were they? Bandits? Raiders? The very specters of our nightmares, armed with nothing but malice and greed. The stories whispered around campfires, tales of merciless brigands who tore through the night, leaving only ruin in their wake, flooded my mind. I remembered a traveler, a woman I'd met at the last inn, her voice trembling like a leaf in the wind as she recounted how her goods were taken, her life upended in an instant. And then, I remembered the stars. They winked down at us, indifferent. Did they know what lurked beneath their eternal gaze? Did they see the fear etched on our faces? I stole a glance at Ilara. Her wild hair framed a face hardened by the trials of the road, yet her spirit shone fierce. "We can't just sit here," she hissed, eyes darting to the tree line, a silent challenge to the darkness. "We're not the prey. We are not weak." But words only go so far, don't they? The stories that bind us, that remind us of bravery, seem thin when faced with the reality of death creeping closer. We could hear the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs underfoot, an orchestra of chaos sharpening at the edges of our minds. Then, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall and hulking, cloaked in black, the darkness bending to his will. The fire illuminated the flash of steel, the glint of eyes that promised no mercy. My breath hitched, an icy grip wrapping around my throat. "Hand over your valuables," he growled, the words a growl from the abyss. "Or face the consequences." I felt Ilara's fingers brush against my wrist, a silent promise, we are not alone. But the truth lay heavy in the air. We were travelers, tossed upon the currents of fate, and the storm was upon us. Garrick drew himself up, old bones creaking like a ship at sea. "You think to take from us? You'll find nothing but the wrath of a desperate soul," he rasped, his voice thunderous, as if he could summon the very spirits of the earth to rise against the marauder. The bandit laughed, a low, chilling sound. Desperate souls are the easiest to break. In that moment, time tangled and twisted, memories of laughter around a hearth, of dreams untainted by the world's cruelty, all faded into a backdrop of impending violence. I remembered the tales of heroes, but this was not a tale of glory. This was survival, raw and visceral, with no heroes on the horizon. "Get the horses!" Ilara shouted again, voice ringing with a determination that filled the space between us with a flicker of hope. But as I glanced toward the animals tied to the trees, I saw shadows moving between the trunks. More of them? I cursed under my breath. No amount of courage could shield us from the weight of their numbers. 3 figures emerged, laughter bubbling like a cauldron of nightmares, each step drawing them closer, each heartbeat a countdown to calamity. Then, in a moment that felt stitched together by fate, Ilara lunged. She was fierce, wild, a storm unleashed as she charged at the lead bandit, knife raised as if it could tear apart the very fabric of our fears. "Run!" she screamed at me. And I ran. My feet thundered against the forest floor, a desperate flight toward the horses, toward survival. The earth felt cold and unyielding beneath me, each step a reminder of what I left behind. I could hear shouts, the clash of metal, the cries of the wounded. Each sound was a knife to my soul as I fumbled with the reins, heart racing against the echo of war. But in that frenzy, an image flickered in my mind, the silhouette of Ilara, a fiery spirit against a tide of darkness. "We are not weak," I whispered, the words ghosting through the night, a litany of defiance. The horses whinnied in protest, sensing the chaos brewing behind me, but I couldn't pause. I felt like a ghost, slipping between worlds, the world of the living and the world of the dead. And as I finally mounted, the branches of the trees reached for me like grasping hands, begging me to stay, to join the fight. But I could feel the weight of my fear, and it was crushing, relentless. The shadows spread, and the bandits were a storm, a violent tempest of greed and despair. I turned back, just once, to catch a glimpse of Ilara, fighting with the ferocity of 1,000 stars. She was beautiful, a warrior against the night, but I was a coward, a witness to the tempest that raged around us. With one final pull on the reins, I spurred my horse forward, the forest swallowing me whole. I didn't look back, but the echoes of that night would haunt me, shadows trailing at my heels, a reminder of the life I fought to protect, a life where bandits and raiders lurked just beyond the firelight, where safety was an illusion crafted by the bravest of hearts. The night was alive, but so were we, and in the depths of that darkness, I felt a flicker of determination ignite. The world was dangerous, but so was hope. And as I galloped into the abyss, the horizon whispered promises of dawn, a dawn where stories would be written anew, where fear could transform into strength, and where the shadows of bandits and raiders would become mere echoes of a past I refused to surrender to. The wind howls like a banshee, a piercing scream that cuts through the night, raking across the skin of the old caravan. I can't tell if it's the storm or my heart that's pounding in my ears, a rhythmic war drum echoing the dread that coils tightly around my throat. Each gust carries the promise of destruction, dragging with it shadows that dance between the flickering flames of our dwindling firelight. I remember the warmth of the sun on my face, a distant memory now, suffocated beneath a blanket of frost and fury. A figure stumbles against the wind, his silhouette barely visible against the swirling chaos. I recognize him immediately, Kellen, always the stubborn fool, his eyes set with that fierce defiance that has seen him through countless storms, both in the sky and in his own soul. "We have to go," he shouts, his voice nearly swallowed by the tempest. "If we don't move now, we'll be buried here." But how can we move when the frostbite grips our limbs and the icy breath of the storm claws at our resolve? I remember the look on Lyra's face, pale as moonlight, her breath visible in the bitter air. She stands beside the wagon, arms crossed against the cold, teeth clenched in a battle against fear. "Kellen, you're not thinking straight." "It's too late for caution," he growls, frustration spilling over. The ground beneath us trembles, the earth seemingly aware of our plight, as if urging us to flee, but where? I feel the weight of the choice pressing down on me. Stasis or chaos? But isn't it chaos that has always shaped us? I remember the last storm, the one that tore through our caravan like the claws of a beast, ripping the canvas and swallowing our supplies whole. That day, I lost more than just bread and blankets, I lost a piece of my spirit, too, a flicker of hope dimmed by the chill of despair. "Come on, Kellen, you can't drag us into another storm," I plead, my voice barely above a whisper, trembling like the branches of the trees swaying in the wind. "We'll freeze to death before we even reach the next village." "We can't stay here," he snaps back, the fire reflecting the battle in his eyes, fear masked by anger. "It's a dance I know too well." The weight of his past clings to him like a shroud, a history of loss and survival that he wears as armor. He is tireless, relentless, but this time, I fear he's too far gone, lost in the bluster of his bravado. The howl of the wind grows louder, a haunting melody punctuated by the crack of thunder that shakes the very ground beneath our feet. It feels like the world itself is rebelling, pushing against our feeble attempts to remain grounded. I glance toward Lyra, the warmth of her spirit my only solace in this freezing void. Her eyes, wide and shimmering with unshed tears, reflect the flickers of the fire, a fragile light in this tempest of darkness. "Lyra, we have to make a choice," I say, my voice breaking. "We can't let fear rule us, but we can't let pride blind us either." The words feel heavy, like stones thrown into the abyss, rippling outward into uncertainty. She nods slowly, her breath visible in the frigid air, a ghost of warmth in the cold. "We can't die here," she whispers, more to herself than to us. I can see the fight dwindling in her, just as the flames are flickering. "Then let's move." Kellen's voice erupts again, fierce and defiant, but now there's a hint of desperation. He turns to me, I searching mine, as if I hold the answer to this cruel riddle. And in that moment, everything freezes, the storm, the fear, the very essence of time itself. I remember the first time we started this journey, filled with laughter and dreams, the sun setting golden upon the horizon. Now, it's a distant memory, smothered beneath layers of cold and regret. "All right," I finally breathe, my words a fragile thread weaving through the chaos. "But we move together. No one gets left behind." Kellen's shoulders relax, a moment's relief washing over him, but Lyra shakes her head. "Together," she echoes. "But what if—" "Stop," I interject, and the wind stops too, if only for a heartbeat. "We can't think about what ifs. We'll face what comes. As a family." The storm roars again, as if mocking our resolve, but it's no match for the bond we share. The three of us are united, blood and spirit intertwined, forged in hardship. I feel the warmth of their presence beside me, a flicker of hope against the encroaching darkness. Kellen steps forward, a warrior ready to charge into battle. "On three," he says, determination lining his voice. 1, 2, but before he can finish, the sky opens up. The ground shakes violently beneath our feet, and I can feel the icy fingers of fear gripping at my heart, tightening like a vice. The howling wind transforms into a cacophony of chaos, a rage unleashed that threatens to swallow us whole. "Run!" I shout, instinct taking over. Adrenaline floods my veins as we break into a sprint, the wind tearing at our backs, urging us onward. I can hear Lyra's breath behind me, ragged and scared, and Kellen's fierce determination propelling us forward. The world around us blurs, trees become shadows, the ground a distorted memory. And all I can think about is how fragile we are, how easy it is to be swept away by the storm, by our own fears. But in this moment of terror, we become something more. We are the defiance against nature's fury, the heartbeat against the chaos. I remember the warmth of the sun, I remember laughter, I remember, and then the darkness swallows us whole. The storm, relentless and unforgiving, rages on, a cruel testament to our struggle. But within that maelstrom, our hearts beat defiantly, and the fight is not over yet. The air hangs heavy, thick with an unsettling stillness, as if the world itself is holding its breath. Shadows stretch across cobbled streets, whispering secrets of decay. A sudden cough slices through the silence, a jagged sound echoing off the walls of a once bustling marketplace. The market stands abandoned, once vibrant and colorful, now a haunting tableau of empty stalls draped in dust. I stand there, paralyzed, watching as a woman cradles her child, the boy's face pale, eyes glassy, an innocent soul caught in the maw of an unseen predator. "Mother," he whispers, each syllable a struggle, his voice barely a breath against the weight of despair. She rocks him gently, but her own body trembles, a vessel of dread. I want to scream, to pull them both away from this nightmare, but I can't move. I can't breathe. I remember when laughter echoed here, when merchants hawked their wares, and the scent of spices mingled with the promise of adventure. But that was before the shadows crept in, before the plague seeped through the cracks of our lives like ink on parchment. And then there's Tariq, a merchant whose once proud heart now beats with the rhythm of fear. The Silk Road, his lifeline, has become a twisted vein, pumping disease through the very pulse of civilization. He stands at the edge of the marketplace, eyes roving, searching for anyone who might still cling to hope, a fading ember in an all-consuming darkness. "Is anyone left?" he cries, voice breaking like glass. "Will anyone barter for my silks? My spices?" But the streets are silent, only the wind answering him with a mournful howl. Each empty stall tells a story, each shadow a ghost of a life extinguished. The more he calls, the more the silence envelops him, crushing hope beneath its weight. I see him falter, a flicker of despair crossing his face, as he draws back from the void, his heart a battleground of desperation and denial. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit corner of the city, Amina sits alone. A healer, once revered, now a pariah, the weight of her knowledge a curse. Her hands tremble as she mixes herbs, the scent of dried lavender swirling with the bitter rosemary. "I can save them," she murmurs to herself, but the words feel hollow. She remembers the townsfolk, their laughter, their stories. Now, they look at her with fear, as if she herself were the disease, a dark witch casting a spell of doom. Each day, they bring her their sick, the cries of the afflicted a haunting symphony that lingers in her ears long after they leave. She feels their pain as if it were her own, each fevered brow a reminder of her failure. "I'm not a monster," she whispers into the void, as if the very walls might believe her. But the truth gnaws at her, she can't save them all. Outside, the sun begins its descent, casting an eerie glow over the city. A distant bell tolls, its sound a sharp reminder of the passage of time, of lives slipping through fingers like sand. Tariq's voice rings out again, quieter this time, a desperate plea for connection. "Is anyone left?" The wind carries his words, twisting them into a cruel echo, as if the universe itself mocks him. He looks toward Amina's dwelling, where shadows dance like phantoms, and for a brief moment, their eyes meet across the distance, a tether of shared suffering binding them in this moment of despair. And then it happens. The boy in the marketplace convulses, a shuddering gasp escaping his lips. His mother's wail pierces the air, a haunting cry that reverberates through the streets, pulling at the very threads of existence. It's the sound of a heart breaking, of innocence lost. I am rooted to the spot, a witness to catastrophe, powerless to intervene. Amina hears it too. The mournful song of anguish, and without thinking, she gathers her herbs and rushes into the street. "Let me help," she calls, desperation fueling her steps as she closes the distance, yet fear lingers in the eyes of those she approaches. They retreat, instinctively recoiling from the specter of death that seems to follow her like an unrelenting shadow. "Please," she begs, "I can save him." But the crowd parts like the Red Sea before her, fear weaving through their veins, a poisonous vine that chokes out trust. What is a healer without a patient? What is a heart without hope? Tariq watches, torn between his own desperation and the instinct to turn away. He knows the power of despair, it clings to you, a leech sucking the very life from your soul. Yet, like a moth drawn to a flame, he finds himself taking a step forward. "Amina," he shouts, his voice a lifeline thrown into the abyss. "If you can help him, then do it." But she hesitates, caught in the web of fear and uncertainty. The shadows seem to close in tighter, suffocating her resolve. Can she truly save him? Can she defy the plague that has become a shroud over their lives? The boy gasps again, and the sound shatters whatever wall remains between them, driving Amina forward. "Move aside," she commands, her voice fierce, filled with a courage she didn't know she possessed. The onlookers part, and she kneels by the child, fingers trembling as she searches for the necessary herbs, her heart racing. I stand back, a spectator in a world unraveling, and I feel it, the crushing weight of their pain, their fear, and the unbearable hope that flickers like a candle in the dark. The plague is a beast, a ravenous creature that feasts on their despair, but in this moment, there's a flicker, a whisper of possibility. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretch like fingers reaching for something they can't quite grasp. The darkness waits, patient and predatory. And the air thickens, heavy with the knowledge that each breath could be the last, and the world outside is teetering on the brink of oblivion. In the silence, I remember what it means to fight, to hope, to feel. The plague may consume us, may strip us of our laughter, of our lives, but in the flicker of humanity, in the shared struggle, there lies a possibility. A whisper against the roar of death, a heartbeat against the silence. And as Amina leans closer to the boy, the world holds its breath, caught in the fragile balance between despair and the flicker of hope. The air crackles, thick with tension, as the distant echo of hooves on cobblestones reverberates through the narrow alleyways. I remember the moment vividly, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that reached out like skeletal fingers grasping for the last remnants of light. I stood there, breathless, heart thundering in my chest, as the soldiers streamed past, their faces set in grim determination. The weight of a crumbling empire hung heavily over the city, and even the rat seemed to scurry with a sharper urgency, aware of the danger that lurked. Kira clutched her daughter tightly, her knuckles white against the fabric of her dress, a desperate shield against the chaos that swirled like a dark storm around them. "Don't look, Ilara," she whispered, but the little girl's eyes were wide, reflecting the flickering flames that danced like demons in the twilight. Kira had fought, clawed, scraped to keep a semblance of order in a life that had turned upside down. She remembered their laughter not long ago, the way they made crowns of daisies as they wandered the meadows. Now, those memories felt like a cruel joke, a tantalizing mirage fading into the inevitable void. A shout ripped through the air, and Kira flinched. The world shifted around her, the chaos of shifting empires slamming against her like a wave. She thought of their trade routes, the lifeblood that once flowed freely, connecting cities, cultures, and dreams. Now, those arteries of commerce lay choked with the debris of war, the fierce grip of political instability tightening around the neck of hope. How could it come to this? She remembered the stories, the whispered promises of prosperity. But those words had become ghosts, echoing in the hollow chambers of her heart. Across the street, a merchant named Eric stood frozen, his cart of spices and silks abandoned, the vibrant colors of his wares dulled by the dust of despair. He had once been a man of wealth, a man whose laughter rang like silver bells in taverns, where patrons reveled in the warmth of his generosity. But now, as the shadows of conflict closed in, he felt like a mere shadow himself, an echo of what had been. His hands trembled as he recalled the feel of fine fabric slipping through his fingers, the sweet scent of cinnamon that had once brought people flocking to his stall. But what good were scents and colors when the streets were stained with blood? "Trade is dead," he murmured, his voice a ghost of its former strength. What is a merchant without trade? The question hung heavy in the air, a stone cast into still waters, rippling into the depths of their shared despair. He watched Kira, her eyes bright with unquenched fire, and a flicker of something ignited within him, a spark of rebellion against the choking darkness. They were all caught in this web of uncertainty, each strand woven with fear, anger, and an unyielding desire to survive. Kira felt the pull of his gaze, the weight of shared understanding. They were two souls adrift in a tempest, each battling their own demons. "We can't just wait for them to take everything," she said, her voice trembling but fierce. Her heart raced with the urgency of their plight, the words tumbled out of her, raw and desperate. "We must find another way, reclaim what is ours." And just like that, the flicker ignited into a flame, the promise of something more than mere survival. Eric nodded, the ghosts of his past flickering in his mind. He remembered the joy of trade, the way it had woven lives together like a tapestry, rich and vibrant. "Then we fight," he declared, and the words fell into the air like a cloak that wrapped around them, binding their fates into a single thread. But the stakes were high. The winds of war howled, and the city cried out in agony. As they took their first step together, shadows lengthened and stretched, dark figures lurking just outside the edges of their vision. Kira's heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead, the sacrifices, the choices that would haunt them long after the dust settled. Each decision felt like a tick of a clock, a countdown to an uncertain future. Time was slipping through their fingers, and with it, the fragile thread of hope. They moved cautiously, weaving through the alleys that felt alive with whispers of betrayal. The ghosts of the past haunted every corner, memories clinging like cobwebs. The time-worn stone seemed to pulse beneath their feet, murmuring secrets of those who had stood where they stood, moments away from an upheaval that would change everything. In the distance, the clangor of metal clashed against their resolve. Each strike was a heartbeat, the rhythm of war syncing with the cadence of their fears. They were an unlikely duo, united in their desperation, their fractured dreams merging into a singular vision, a rebellion ignited by the raw ache of loss. The world outside shifted violently, and they pressed on, fueled by the intensity that surged through them, a concoction of dread and determination. Kira felt the warmth of Ilara at her side, her small hand gripping her mother's fiercely, as if to say, "We will not be crushed." That spark of innocence, that flicker of defiance in the face of overwhelming darkness, propelled Kira forward into the storm. In that moment, the city trembled, caught in the tension of shifting empires and the whispers of history. The trade routes that had once been arteries of life were now battlegrounds, each inch fought for with blood and tears. Kira and Eric stood poised at the nexus of change, the raw truth of their existence echoing through the chaos. They would either rise or fall together, but the fight was just beginning. Time warped around them, each second stretching, every breath heavy with the weight of a shared destiny. They were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for a future, for dreams that refused to die in the face of despair. The city echoed with the cries of the past, and as the night deepened, they moved forward, ready to challenge the shadows that threatened to engulf them. And the world watched, holding its breath, as the flicker of hope ignited into a blaze that could consume empires. The air crackled with unspoken words, a cacophony of languages swirling like a violent storm. Gabriel stood at the edge of the chaotic market, his heart racing, each beat echoing the frantic calls of vendors hawking their wares. He felt the weight of 1,000 voices, each syllable, each shout, piercing through him, yet he understood none. A woman beside him, her eyes wide with desperation, reached for a fruit too ripe, too vivid, too red. Her voice rose, sharp and pleading, but the words danced away from him, maddeningly out of reach. "Please," she screamed, and Gabriel's stomach twisted. He wanted to help her, wanted to grasp her panic swirling in the air, but her language was a locked door, and he stood outside, shivering in the cold. "Please!" Her hands flailed as if to tether the invisible threads of understanding that would connect them. He could only watch, paralyzed by the knowledge that her plea meant life or death. And there, a flash, a shadow flitting through the crowd. A man in a dark coat, his face obscured, eyes glinting like shards of glass. Gabriel's instinct screamed danger, but all he could do was stand frozen, paralyzed by the noise, the confusion, the overwhelming inability to shout a warning, to say, "Look out!" Each second stretched, thick like syrup, as the woman's eyes darted back and forth, fear carving deep lines into her brow. Gabriel strained to catch her gaze, to relay some semblance of understanding, but the words he needed caught in his throat. "The man! Behind you!" But silence wrapped around him like a shroud, choking the warning before it could take flight. Then she turned, her expression morphing from confusion to horror, and just like that, a scream escaped her lips, sharp and raw, a sound that cut through the market's clamor. A warning, a prayer, a final call for help. Gabriel lunged forward, adrenaline surging, but the shadows swallowed the moment whole. The man vanished, merging into the crowd, leaving the woman gasping for breath amidst a tide of strangers, faces blurring into anonymity. His heart sank, a slow, spiraling descent into despair. What had he done? What could he have done? The language barrier, the prison built from words unspoken, held them hostage. He wanted to shout, to rage against the injustice, to scream at the universe for playing this cruel game. Memories bubbled to the surface, his childhood, tangled in the confusion of his grandfather's thick accent, the way he'd laughed when Gabriel mispronounced a word. Language is a dance, he used to say, but sometimes we step on toes. In that moment, Gabriel was just a child again, lost in a world where no one understood him, where every misstep led to heartbreak. Ahead, the woman stumbled, her eyes darting, searching for something, someone, to anchor herself to amid the chaos. He felt the pull of her fear, a thread that wove through the very fabric of his being. He could not let her fall. Not again. Not like this. I remember, he found himself whispering, recalling his own struggles to bridge the gaps, the times when his laughter had met the blank stares of those who couldn't quite hear the melody of his words. I remember, he said it again, as if repetition could conjure the courage he so desperately needed. And then, a flicker of recognition, the man reappeared, a spectre of danger gliding through the thrumming chaos. The woman's hand trembled, clutching a woven bag, a makeshift shield against the unknown. He could see her resolve harden, even as the shadows of uncertainty danced in her eyes. "Gabriel!" A voice sliced through the noise, sharp and unmistakable. It was Emilia, his sister, her presence a beacon amid the storm. She rushed to him, her breath jagged as she grasped his arm. "What's happening?" Panic laced her words, a mirror of his own fear. "I don't know," he stammered, torn between the urge to protect the woman and the fierce love that bound him to Emilia. "We need to help her." But the world around them twisted, a kaleidoscope of frantic gestures and frantic voices. Emilia's eyes widened as she attempted to grasp the danger, a peril neither of them could articulate. "We can't, Gabriel, it's not safe." The woman turned, her gaze locking onto Gabriel's, a silent plea that cut deeper than any spoken language. In that moment, he saw the truth, their fates were intertwined, tangled within the threads of misunderstanding. She was a mother, a sister, a daughter, someone who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders, just as he did. He felt the pulse of their shared humanity connecting them, a vibrant thread against the looming darkness. I remember, the words spilled from him like blood, like truth. "You know what it's like to be trapped." He couldn't explain it all, his words tumbled out in a frantic dance as he pointed to the shadows, the man lurking just beyond their sight. "We can't let him take you. Please?" Emilia shook her head, but Gabriel's desperation pushed him forward. He could not let silence be their darkest enemy. In a world where words failed, actions would have to speak louder. He took a step, then another, the rhythm of his heartbeat pounding in his ears, urging him forward. But the crowd shifted like a living thing, and he felt the pull of uncertainty. Every face blurred, every conversation twisted into a dark echo of incomprehension. And as he reached for the woman's hand, his fingers brushing against the warmth of her skin, he could sense the world trembling on the precipice of chaos. "Trust me," he shouted, feeling the weight of desperation in his voice. The man was closing in, and the barriers of language felt like walls crashing down around them. He needed her to understand without words, to see the urgency in his eyes. In that moment, communication became primal, a dance of instincts, a bond forged in raw fear and humanity. And as the shadows loomed, Gabriel understood with a painful clarity that the greatest challenge was not just the language they couldn't share, but the fear that wrapped around them, suffocating hope. The city buzzed around them like a hive of bees, unaware of the peril brewing beneath its surface. He felt the heartbeat of the world, thrumming in his ears, whispering, for if they could not find the words, they must find the courage. The air pulsed with a tension that could snap. And in that fragile moment, amidst the clamor of a polyglot existence, Gabriel, Emilia, and the woman were entwined in a fate that echoed through time, woven into the very fabric of what it meant to be human, lost and yet desperately seeking connection, always seeking the light in the dark. But time pressed tight around them, a clock ticking down to an unknown end. The stench gripped the air like a vice, clawing at the throat and twisting stomachs into knots. I stood there, paralyzed, my heart thundering against my ribcage like a prisoner desperate to escape. The shadows cast by flickering lanterns danced grotesquely across the cobblestones, whispering warnings of what was to come. Just a few hours earlier, the market had bustled with vibrancy, vendors shouting, children tugging at skirts, laughter ringing out, but now, the silence was deafening. The ground beneath me felt alive, pulsating with the weight of dread. "Lena!" Ethan's voice shattered the stillness, raw and panicked, pulling me back into the moment. He stumbled toward me, eyes wild, hands shaking. There's something wrong with the water." I could see it in his eyes, the fear spiraling like smoke from a dying fire. The water, a simple, everyday element, had become a sinister specter haunting our village. "You don't mean," I trailed off, the implications wrapping around my throat like a noose. He nodded, breath hitching. "People are getting sick. Bad sick. They're sick." I interrupted, my voice rising with urgency. "How sick?" Like the plague sick." I saw Miriam. She was convulsing, her skin was yellow. "Yellow, Lena!" A chill slithered down my spine, and I could barely breathe. Miriam, the woman who brought my son fresh bread every morning. I remembered her laughter, her warmth, and now all I could see was the image of her body convulsing, a marionette without strings. The thought twisted my stomach tighter, spiraling into a pit of despair. We had trusted the water. We had eaten from the earth, believed in its purity. But trust is a fragile thing, easily shattered by a single drop of poison. I could almost hear the laughter of the universe mocking us, so small, so naive. "I remember the market," I muttered, trying to cling to a strand of normalcy. "The fish, the vegetables, everything looked fine, Ethan. But what if it wasn't?" His voice was strained, a taut wire ready to snap. "What if someone," he paused, swallowing hard. "What if someone contaminated it? On purpose?" The thought hung in the air, suffocating. The very idea echoed through the alleys of my mind, a malevolent whisper that sent shivers through my bones. The people I had known my entire life, now faceless figures, slowly slipping into the shadows of fear. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would awaken some unspeakable horror. "We can't just stand here." Ethan's eyes darted around, searching for answers in the darkness. "We need to warn the others. We need to find out where it started." "But what if it's already too late?" The weight of those words crashed over me like an avalanche, burying any flicker of hope I dared to harbor. I thought of my son, asleep in our cottage, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfurling beyond our walls. My hands trembled at the thought of what might happen if the taint reached him. "Lena, listen." Ethan's voice tore through my spiraling thoughts. "We need to go. Now." As we sprinted down the narrow streets, the world around us blurred, the familiar becoming foreign in the face of impending doom. The cries of the afflicted echoed, haunting melodies that would forever linger in the recesses of my mind. Each step was weighted with the knowledge that the air we breathed could be laced with poison, that the food we ate might carry a death sentence. "Do you remember last summer?" I shouted over the rising tide of panic. "The festival? The stew we made?" His face paled, and I knew he was thinking of the shared laughter, the camaraderie, the simple joy of cooking together. But now, that stew felt like a betrayal, a potential vessel of death. I could almost taste the tang of the herbs, the warmth of the broth, but all I could feel was the gnawing fear that it too might have been tainted. "I remember," he said, his voice cracking, the weight of memories heavy between us. What if we're too late?" I interjected sharply. "What if it was us all along?" The thought chilled me. Had we unknowingly poisoned ourselves with our own hands, with our own greed? The farms that had fed us for generations now felt like a curse, an intricate web of deception spun from the ground up. With every passing moment, the shadows closed in tighter, the air thick with an unshakable sense of dread. I caught sight of flickering candle flames in windows, shadows of families huddled together, but I also saw the emptiness in those homes, the fear that had seeped into their bones. The realization hit me like a fist to the gut: we were all part of this storm. "Ethan, we have to warn everyone," I said fiercely, the fire igniting in my chest. "We can't let this spread. Not to the children, not to anyone." He nodded, determination flashing in his eyes, but it was tinged with desperation, a silent acknowledgement that the battle was already upon us. We raced through the deserted streets, hearts pounding, breaths shallow, the world around us fading into a nightmarish blur. And then, from the darkness, a figure emerged, a woman, her face pale and drawn, eyes wide with terror. I recognized her instantly. She was one of the village elders, the keeper of our history and traditions. "Help me," she gasped, falling to her knees, clutching her stomach. It's in the food." Panic clawed at my throat. "What do you mean?" "The bread," she whispered, voice trembling. "It's poison," and in that moment, as the weight of her words crashed over us like a tidal wave, I understood. This wasn't just about tainted water or rotten food. This was about trust shattered, foundations crumbling, and the very essence of survival torn asunder. The culinary perils we had taken for granted now loomed like a spectre in the night, promising doom. As the village stood on the precipice of chaos, we were left to wrestle with the haunting realization that the things we cherished most, our meals, our gatherings, our very lives, had become the very instruments of our destruction. The clock ticked ominously, and beneath its relentless rhythm, a chilling truth lingered: the hunt had begun, and we were now prey in a game we never chose to play. In the dark, we stood at the crossroads of despair and hope, knowing all too well that the choices we made in the coming moments could save us, or seal our fates forever. The air was thick with dread, as the church bell tolled midnight, a sound that rang like a death knell, echoing through the narrow cobblestone streets of a town teetering on the brink of chaos. Shadows stretched long under the pale moonlight, twisting and writhing like spirits caught between worlds. There, in the heart of this turmoil, stood Miriam, clutching her rosary, the bead slick with sweat and trembling fingers. She could feel the pulsing of her own heartbeat, a frantic drum calling out against the silence, the promise of violence drawing ever closer. "I remember the way faith used to cradle me, like a mother's arms," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread against the rising tension. "I remember the warmth of belief, the sweet taste of hope." But hope was a ghost tonight, and her thoughts spiraled into a dark abyss. The townsfolk were restless, murmurs of heresy pulsed through the air like a disease. She could hear the accusations, the blame, each word sharper than the last, slicing through the already frayed fabric of their community. Across the square, Samuel stood rigid, caught between the flickering shadows of the past and the storm brewing before him. The village's pastor, he was a man of faith, yet in this moment, he felt like a fraud. "I remember the first time I held the Bible," he recalled, the memory bittersweet. Its pages smelled of promise, of salvation. Now, they feel like a weight dragging me into the ground. His hands clenched into fists, the calluses of a lifetime of prayer brushing against each other. The weight of every sermon he had preached pressed against his chest, and he wondered if he had ever truly believed. A flicker of firelight caught his eye, illuminating a group of men, hunters of heretics, gathered in a darkened alley, their faces masks of rage and righteousness. They had come to cleanse the town, to rid it of the sinful. He could hear their threats, sharp as knives, slicing through the night. "Burn the witch! Purge the evil!" And then there was Elara, the town's outcast, standing defiantly in the shadows, her heart pounding against the cage of her ribs. I remember the way they looked at me, she thought, her breath hitching. Their eyes were daggers, piercing through my very soul. She had once walked among them, laughter ringing out like bells. But laughter had turned to whispers, and whispers to shouts. They accused her of witchcraft, of consorting with dark forces because she dared to challenge the rigid beliefs that bound them. This night was her reckoning, and she felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her. The roles of the righteous and the damned twisted and turned in a grotesque dance. She could feel the pull of something ancient, something primal. It fueled her resolve. I will not be silenced, she vowed, though the chill of fear licked at her heels. As the fire grew brighter, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls, Miriam's heart ached for her sister, lost to the flames of fervor and misplaced faith. Did they think they were saving her, she thought, fighting back tears? Did they believe the flames would purify her soul? She could still hear her sister's screams echoing in her mind, a chilling reminder of the cost of their blind devotion. With a surge of emotion, she stepped forward, her voice trembling but resolute. "Stop! This is madness." The words fell into the night like stones, rippling against the surface of the brewing storm. A silence fell, heavy and suffocating, as all eyes turned to her. Samuel's heart raced. He had spent years preaching love, but now he felt a tide of anger rising within him. They will burn her alive, he thought, the weight of the Bible in his pocket suddenly unbearably heavy. I can't let this happen. God is love, but what if love isn't enough? He opened his mouth to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. What could he say? Should he defend her, risk his own position? Or should he stand by and watch the flames consume yet another innocent life? Each heartbeat echoed louder, drowning out the cries for retribution that filled the night air. Ilara's eyes locked onto Samuel's, an unspoken plea woven between them. Help me, her gaze screamed, but would he betray everything he believed to save her? She felt the world closing in, the weight of judgment heavier than the shackles that bound her. I am no witch, she whispered to the shadows, feeling the truth seep through the cracks of her heart. I am just a woman, a soul seeking redemption in a world that has forgotten what that means. But the mob was stirring, they were alive with fury, fueled by the flames of their conviction. You will burn, they chanted, their voices a cacophony of righteous fury, drowning out all reason. Miriam felt the heat of their anger wash over her, a tidal wave threatening to engulf them all. Then, out of the chaos, a voice rang clear, Samuel's voice, breaking through the storm. No. We are not judges. We are brothers and sisters. The words hung in the air, a fragile lifeline amidst the chaos. But doubt flickered in the eyes of the crowd, and the tension crackled like electricity. Would they listen? Or would they allow their fear and hatred to blind them to their shared humanity? And in that moment, the clock struck one, reverberating through the square, calling out to the heavens, to the ghosts of generations past, to those who had stood at the crossroads of faith and fear. The air crackled with anticipation, and in the silence that followed, every soul held its breath, teetering on the brink of an abyss, a moment where everything could change or shatter into a million shards of regret. Miriam, Samuel, and Ilara stood at the edge of that moment, the weight of their histories and futures pressing down upon them. They felt the raw, unyielding power of belief, conflict, and the desperate search for understanding. The town gathered around them, shadows and light battling for dominion over their hearts and minds, a world suspended between faith and fear, love and hate, life and death. In that frozen heartbeat of existence, the story unfurled, a tapestry woven with threads of desperation, hope, and an unyielding quest for redemption. The echoes of their past whispered in the winds, the future a vast expanse of uncertainty. In that moment of reckoning, they did not know that this was only the beginning, the flicker of a flame that could either ignite a revolution or consume them all. And in that breathless night, the lines between sinner and saint blurred into an indistinguishable haze, leaving only the raw, aching truth of what it means to believe. The clock ticks loudly in the dimly lit office, each chime a reminder of the weight pressing down on Maria's shoulders, a weight forged from the endless layers of bureaucracy that suffocated her dreams. She sits amidst mountains of paper, her fingers trembling as they brush against the crumpled forms, the ink faded like her hopes. Her heart races, a drum echoing the chaos outside, a cacophony of shouting merchants, the clatter of carts, the whispers of desperation in the air. She can feel it, the tension stretching like a taut wire, ready to snap. I remember the day I thought I could finally leave this place, she mutters, more to herself than to anyone else. It was a time when the world felt wide open, full of promise. A chance to cross borders, to trade spices and silk, a dance of commerce that could change everything. But now, trapped in the labyrinth of trade regulations and taxes, she is a ghost of that ambitious woman, tethered to a desk by chains of red tape that seem to grow thicker with every passing day. Across the office, Javier stares at the ceiling, lost in thought. His brow is furrowed, a storm brewing behind his blue eyes. They don't understand, he whispers, almost pleading, the struggle, the risk. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. He recalls the faces of those who depended on him, the small farmers and artisans whose lives hung by a thread. Every permit, every tax, it's a death sentence for them. He flicks through the papers on his desk, the words swimming like ghosts, taunting him with their complexity. What's the point of this progress if it crushes the ones we love? There's a rattle from the door, and both Maria and Javier snap to attention, their breaths caught in their throats. The customs officer strides in, a figure of authority wrapped in an air of indifference. His eyes scan the room, calculating, assessing the worth of dreams piled on the floor like discarded junk. You're behind on your filings, he growls, the words heavy with menace. You know the penalties. The room grows colder, shadows creeping along the walls like predators. Maria's heart pounds in her chest, she can almost hear the echoes of her dreams fading into the cracks of the concrete walls. She looks at Javier, and their eyes meet, a silent pact formed in the chaos, a shared understanding that this was more than just paperwork. It was life. It was everything. I remember the hope, she whispers, her voice barely above a breath. Back when we thought we could change the world. The memory flickers like a candle flame, fragile and beautiful. A marketplace bustling with laughter, an exchange of stories as valuable as gold. Now, it's a battlefield. Each regulation a weapon, each tax a landmine. Javier clenches his fists, rage bubbling under the surface. We can't let them destroy us, he says, an intensity igniting his words. They expect us to bow to their rules, to accept our fate like sheep. But we're not just numbers. We're human beings. We matter. The customs officer takes a step closer, the air thick with tension. You're playing a dangerous game, he warns, his voice low and threatening. Every delay, every mistake, money lost, people hurt. You think this is just paperwork? It's a web, and you're caught. You pull at one thread, and it unravels everything. Unravel. The word hangs in the air, filled with foreboding. Maria swallows hard, her throat dry, visions of her life collapsing swirling in her mind. She sees the farmers, the artisans, their hopes resting on her ability to navigate this twisted maze. I won't let them down, she vows softly, though doubt gnaws at her resolve. The clock ticks again, hauntingly loud, counting down the moments until they're crushed beneath the weight of bureaucracy. Javier stands, determination hardening his gaze. We fight, he declares, his voice steady despite the tremor of fear swirling in the pit of his stomach. We find a way through this mess. We take back the narrative, the power. They think they can suffocate us, but they don't know who we are. Outside, the noise of the marketplace swells, a reminder of what's at stake. The cries of vendors, the laughter of children, the clinking of coins, all woven into the fabric of their existence. Maria's heart aches, the threads of their lives intermingling, more precious than gold. Together, she breathes, a quiet promise rippling through the air like electricity. We can change it. With every heartbeat, the tension escalates. Each breath is heavy, thick with the unspoken fears and hopes that bind them together. The customs officer narrows his eyes, sensing the shift in the room, a storm brewing on the horizon, a revolution sparked by desperation and unity. I remember the taste of freedom, Maria whispers, a fierce light igniting in her eyes. It's time to reclaim it. And with that, the air crackles with possibility, the walls around them vibrating with the energy of unyielding spirit. The clock ticks on, relentless, but there's a spark now, a flame of rebellion igniting in the dim office, fueled by the weight of their shared struggles. The bureaucratic hurdles loom large, a dark cloud overhead, but Maria and Javier stand ready to face it, hearts pounding, breaths coming fast, daring to believe that they can transcend the boundaries imposed upon them. Outside, the world waits, the marketplace alive with hope, the promise of a new dawn just beyond the horizon. The first step into the unknown beckons, a whisper of change in the air, and they will not back down. They will fight, not just for themselves, but for everyone who has ever been caught in the web of red tape, longing for the taste of freedom that lies just out of reach. The sun was a cold, distant star, barely illuminating the damp cobblestones of the port. The air smelled of salt and desperation, a rancid mixture of fish guts and unfulfilled dreams. A ship creaked ominously in the mist, its shadowy hull looming like a beast ready to swallow lives whole. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the tangled ropes and the flickering lanterns that danced like ghosts in the fog. I remember the weight of the goods in my pocket, silk, spices, gold, each a promise, each a curse. "Do you see it?" whispered Eloan, her voice barely a thread above the wind. Her wide eyes searched the depths of the dark sea, brimming with an intensity that made her seem ethereal, yet painfully human. I watched as she bit her lip, a nervous habit she had adopted since we began this harrowing endeavor. The risks were palpable, sticky like sweat on our skin. To transport such valuables was to court danger, pirates, storms, betrayal. I remember thinking, what would it take to lose everything? Just one slip, one mistake, and that's it, I muttered. The words felt like stones in my mouth. I had seen the price of loss, the faces of those who had ventured into the night and never returned. I remembered the old man with the crooked back, his hands empty, but his eyes full of shattered dreams. I could almost hear him whispering, "Value is a thief, my dear. It steals your peace, your sleep, your soul." In the distance, a thunderous crack split the air. The sound of timber splintering echoed like a gunshot, sending chills through my spine. I turned to see the captain, a weathered figure whose face was a map of failures and victories. He was shouting orders, but the words were lost in the chaos. The ship was listing dangerously, the wind howling its ominous song, and Eloan gripped my arm, her nails digging into my flesh as if anchoring herself to reality. "We can't turn back now," she insisted, her voice trembling, yet fierce. "Not after all we've sacrificed." Her dreams were woven into those crates, visions of a better life, freedom from the shackles of our past. But each heart-stopping beat echoed the truth: we were trapped, puppets in a play with no script. I remember the market back home, the vibrant stalls bursting with colors and sounds, laughter mingling with the clink of coins. People bartered with fervor, exchanging trinkets that held stories within them. What was a necklace of tarnished silver worth if it carried the weight of a mother's tears? Or spices that brought the warmth of distant lands into a meager home? They were treasures, yes, but fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. But here, in the thickening fog, those treasures felt hollow, a burden that threatened to consume us. As the ship rocked violently, I caught a glimpse of the horizon, dark clouds swirling like a beast hungry for ignorance. My heart raced as I glanced at Eloan, her face pale, and I felt the churning of my stomach mirror the turmoil around us. We were on the precipice, teetering between hope and despair. "Remember the elixir?" she asked suddenly, her voice a whisper, fragile as a spider's web. "The one we heard about at the tavern? The one that could cure anything?" I nodded, recalling the tales of a mythical potion so powerful it could change one's fate. "What if it's on this ship?" she pressed, her eyes glimmering with a mix of fear and ambition. "What if we find it?" But the thought sent a wave of nausea through me. Cures often came with a price, and desperation had a way of twisting dreams into nightmares. "What if we don't?" I countered, my voice low, each word heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The sound of splintering wood jolted me back to reality. The ship tilted sharply, and I clutched the railing, heart racing like a rabbit caught in the jaws of a predator. Shadows loomed around us, figures moving with intent, and I felt the air thicken with tension. The risks of transporting valuables were no longer abstract, they were tangible, breathing threats that hung over us like the blade of an executioner. Brace yourself, the captain roared, wrestling with the wheel, and the world around me began to fragment, sight, sound, and sense all scattering like leaves in a storm. I looked at Eloan, her expression frozen in a mix of determination and terror. I wanted to reach out, to shield her from the darkness that crept ever closer, but I felt my own fear swallowing me whole. Time warped. Heartbeats stretched and fractured. I remember the night we first dreamed of escape. The moon hung like a silver coin, illuminating our futures, and we had laughed, the sound echoing in the stillness of our quiet lives. But dreams can be fickle, can't they? They shift like smoke, elusive and cruel. Hold on, the captain shouted, and the ship lurched violently. Eloan screamed. The world tilted, the horizon disappearing into the abyss, and for a moment, I was weightless, unmoored from reality. I felt the cold embrace of despair wrap around me, and I grasped for anything solid, anything real. And then it came, the crash. Wood splintered, screams mingled with the roar of the sea, and I was thrown against the railing, pain blossoming across my body. I could hear Eloan's voice, rising above the chaos, a haunting melody of fear and desperation. It pierced through the fog of panic, anchoring me to the moment. "Help! Help us," she cried, and in that instant, I understood, this was what we had traded for our dreams, the fragile balance of hope against the relentless tide of loss. As the ship began to splinter and crack like a dying beast, the realization settled in my bones, we were not just transporting goods, we were transporting the weight of our souls. And as the waves surged toward us, I felt the specter of what we could lose loom larger than the storm itself. Each breath was a prayer, each heartbeat a plea for survival amidst the shards of our shattered dreams. In that moment, everything felt impossibly clear and painfully uncertain, a precipice of risk and reward that would define not just our lives, but the very essence of what we had come to value. The wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the wooden shutters of the caravanserai, a fortress of stone standing defiant against the chaos outside. Dust danced in the flickering light of oil lamps as shadows stretched, creeping and crawling along the walls like forgotten memories. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with the scent of stale bread and something faintly rancid, the remnants of countless travelers passing through. Somewhere, a child cried, a sound both pitiful and haunting, echoing the fears that gnawed at my insides. I remember the knife-edge tension on that night. 3 strangers stood in a circle, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Haji, a merchant of dubious repute, clutched his satchel to his chest, eyes darting like a cornered rat. "I lost everything. The maps, the routes. You think I did this on purpose?" His voice cracked, desperation lacing each syllable. I felt that desperation claw at my throat, a choking reminder of my own vulnerabilities. Then there was Elara, a woman with fire in her spirit, though the embers had dimmed. "You think we're all your enemies, Haji?" Her voice was sharp, slicing through the tension. "You're the only one who knows the way to the next oasis. We're running out of time." She rubbed her arms, a gesture of both defiance and fear. The desert night was unforgiving, and the thought of being lost, swallowed by its endless sands, filled her with dread. "Enough," barked Tarek, the unofficial leader of our ragged band. His presence loomed large, not just in stature but in the weight of his words. "We can't afford to turn on each other. The night is deep, but not as dark as the hearts that betray." I watched as the flickering light cast ghostly shadows on their faces. Tarek's jaw tightened, a silent promise echoing in his eyes. I felt the pull of camaraderie, a tether binding us in a world fraught with danger. But I also sensed the undercurrents of mistrust, a web spun tight around our hearts, each thread a potential fracture. "Do you remember the last caravan?" I whispered, my heart racing. How we lost the way, the memories rushed back, bodies huddled against the cold, the sound of hooves thundering, the screams of those left behind. "I remember," Haji spat, the venom in his words like bitter bile. "You think I'm to blame for that?" "A merchant doesn't lose maps, he loses everything." The tension thickened, a palpable force pushing against us. With each heartbeat, the stakes rose, each breath a reminder of our precarious existence. It felt like the world outside was closing in, the shadows threatening to consume us whole. Ilara stepped closer to Haji, her eyes ablaze. Then help us find the way. Be the man you claim to be. She was aflame, and I felt drawn to her light, even as I recoiled from the potential for combustion. Help! Haji's laughter rang hollow, an echo of something lost. What do you think I am, your savior? The vulnerability in her eyes flickered, and I knew she was holding back tears. None of us are saviors. But we have to rely on each other. We have no other choice. The desert isn't just a wasteland, it's a mirror reflecting our deepest fears, our rawest hopes, and shattered dreams. I felt the weight of my own inadequacies, the desperation to survive clawing at me. How often had I felt like a ghost, drifting through this life, searching for something as simple as belonging? I was losing the battle against despair. I had to find my voice, not just for me, but for all of us. We're not just a caravan, we're a family in this hell. If we can't navigate the darkness together, we might as well surrender to the sand. My words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Haji's gaze shifted, a flicker of remorse. Family? In this world? I've seen what becomes of families in the grip of the desert. Betrayal lurks like a serpent, waiting for the right moment to strike. That's when it hit me. We were all haunted by our pasts, shadows of memory dancing in the corners of our minds. Each of us carried our ghosts, the loss, the betrayal, the fear of solitude. The camaraderie we sought felt like a fragile illusion, flickering with uncertainty. In that moment, I felt the weight of the caravanserai above me, a heavy, ancient silence, as if the very walls were soaked in the memories of those who had passed through. It was a reminder that we were merely the latest in a long line of souls seeking refuge, their hopes and fears echoing off the stones. Let's not be ghosts, I urged, my voice trembling. Let's carve our own path, even if it leads us into darkness. And just like that, the air shifted. Haji's face softened, if only slightly. Ilara stepped forward, the flicker of hope sparking in her eyes. Together. Together, I affirmed, and a fragile alliance began to weave itself among us. Yet, as the night wore on and the shadows deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that something loomed beyond the horizon, waiting to pounce. The desert was vast and unforgiving, a dark expanse punctuated by the flickering of stars high above, silent witnesses to our struggles, our alliances, our very lives. The wind howled again, a voice from the abyss, and I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of uncertainty wrap around me. The journey was far from over, a road winding into oblivion. But in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the flickering light of hope, we stood together, ready to face whatever lay ahead. A chilling wind howled through the empty streets, a ghostly whisper that wrapped around Jess like a shroud. She stood alone beneath a flickering street lamp, her breath visible in the frigid air, anxiety threading through her veins like ice water. The remains of the day hung heavy in the sky, a bruised purple fading into night. She glanced at her phone again, a lifeline that had long since turned into a noose. No signal. No messages. Just silence. It was a silence that screamed, echoing the fears that clawed at her insides. She thought of home, and the way it now felt like a fading photograph, warm hues slowly bleeding into a monochrome of memories. The laughter of children playing, the scent of freshly baked bread, the soft rustle of her mother's voice calling her for dinner. They had always felt safe, wrapped in the cocoon of that little house. But now? Now it was just a distant echo, swallowed by the darkness creeping closer with each passing minute. Jess! A voice cut through the thickening shadows. It was Ethan, his face pinched with worry as he jogged towards her, the weight of the world evident in his eyes. We have to keep moving. We can't stay here. But how could she move? The ground beneath her felt like quicksand, every step a battle against the pull of despair. What if we're running towards something worse, she whispered, her words drenched in doubt. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration mingling with concern. It doesn't matter. Standing still will get us nowhere. We can't let fear decide our fate. He was the type of person who thrived on action, on momentum, and yet even he seemed like a paper boat in a hurricane, fragile and ready to capsize. I remember how his bravery used to inspire me. How the fire in his heart used to warm my own, but now it felt like a flickering flame, a candle being snuffed out by the gusts of uncertainty. I remember the stories we told each other about becoming heroes in our own lives, the night sky above us thick with dreams. But every story needed an ending, and I feared ours was drifting into a darkness we could not escape. Jess could hear the frantic beating of her heart, a drumroll that drowned out the world around her. The chilling reality of being hunted gnawed at her thoughts, turning them into jagged shards of glass, cutting deep. She could almost feel the unrelenting gaze of unseen eyes, watching, waiting, eager to pounce on their vulnerability. Look, we can't let ourselves spiral. We have to focus, Ethan insisted, though his voice trembled, betraying his own fear. Remember the plan? We get to the safe house. We stay together. But plans felt futile in a world turned inside out. Safety was an illusion, a mirage shimmering on the horizon, always out of reach. I remember when I believed in the illusion. I remember the way it felt to lay my head down at night, unburdened, trusting that the morning would greet me with hope. Jess, Ethan's voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. You're scaring me. Scaring you. A bitter laugh escaped her lips, a break in the dam. You think I'm not scared? Look at us. We're two lost souls in a world gone mad. Just then, the silence shattered. A sound, like a distant howl, echoed through the streets, and Jess felt her skin prickle with dread. The howl morphed into something more, a soft, steady thump that reverberated through the ground. It was the heartbeat of something approaching, relentless and terrifying. They were not alone. Run! Jess shouted, the word tearing from her throat, a raw instinct overriding her fear. They surged forward, but every shadow felt alive, every flicker of movement sent her mind racing. With each footfall, memories clawed at her, a cacophony of voices whispering doubt. You're not strong enough. You're not brave enough. The fear wrapped around her heart like a vice, squeezing tighter, each pulse echoing the uncertainty that had taken root in her soul. Ethan sprinted ahead, his back a beacon of strength, but Jess struggled to keep pace. Wait, she gasped, fear curling its fingers around her throat as she fought to push through the weight of isolation. It felt like drowning, gasping for air yet finding only darkness. Jess, come on, he called back, desperation lacing his voice. The distance between them widened, and with it, a chasm of doubt opened in her chest. What if he was right? What if they were meant to fight, to push through this fear? But what if the fight led to a dead end, a place where survival meant losing everything? A flicker of movement caught her eye. Was it a shadow? A ghost? She stumbled, fear clawing at her ankles, and for a brief moment, she felt the weight of her own vulnerability crash over her like a tidal wave. The unfathomable depths of the night seemed to swallow her whole. And in that moment, beneath the oppressive weight of solitude, Jess realized the true battle was not with the darkness around them but within herself. The demons she had carried were far more fearsome than any predator lurking in the shadows. She was running from the ghosts of her own failures, the haunting whispers of doubt that threatened to consume her. Ethan's figure blurred in the distance, a lifeline she desperately needed, yet a reminder of how far she had fallen. Jess! His voice echoed like a beacon, urging her to confront her fears, but each step felt like trudging through molasses, the weight of uncertainty pulling her down. Keep moving, she urged herself, pushing through the thick fog of despair enveloping her. She couldn't let fear win. Not now. Not when hope flickered like a dim star in the vast, unyielding cosmos. In this fractured moment, Jess understood, this was not just about survival or safety, it was about reclaiming her power, her right to fight against the tide of fear that threatened to drown her. She could either succumb to the relentless darkness or ignite the fire within her, fueled by the courage to confront the unknown. And as the world around her spiraled into chaos, Jess drew a shaky breath, her heart pounding in defiance. She would not let the shadows claim her. She was stronger than she knew, and in that realization, she took the first step, bridging the chasm of doubt with the unwavering fortitude of will. The night was dark, but she would not walk it alone. Not anymore. The air hung thick, heavy with the scent of blood and smoke, each jagged breath a reminder of how fragile life was. My heart hammered in my chest, a frantic drum urging me onward, deeper into the shadows of the forest. I could hear their voices, guttural, relentless, echoing off the trees like a haunting melody, always just behind me. They were hunting. They were close. I stumbled over roots, my foot catching, the ground reaching up to twist my ankle in a cruel embrace. Pain shot through me, but it was nothing compared to the fear that gripped my heart. Keep moving, I whispered to myself, my own voice a lifeline, a tether to sanity in the madness. I remembered the stories of the elders, tales spun by flickering firelight, of escape routes etched into the land, of safe havens cradled by ancient trees and whispered allegiance with the local tribes. "Where are you, Hale?" I gasped, my voice barely more than a breath. I could almost see him, my brother, the laughter in his eyes now replaced with a determination that often bordered on reckless. I remembered the way he held his sword, not just as a weapon but as an extension of his will, his laughter ringing through our home like a bell, a promise of protection. But this was no home. This was a nightmare, a twisted labyrinth of shadows and dread, where every breath felt like a betrayal. Hale had taken the lead, brave and foolish, his shoulders squared against the world. I could see his silhouette flitting between the trees, a ghost of hope in the dark. "Follow me," he shouted, his voice cutting through the dread. I clung to the memory of laughter, of dreams spun from starlight, as I pushed forward. I remembered the elders' warnings, the weight of their gazes. "Trust the tribes," they said. "They hold the land, they are the land." My heart twisted at the thought of our last encounter with them, the thick tension in the air as we approached their camp, laden with gifts and fear. The way they eyed us, their faces etched with the lines of history, of grief and survival. I could hear Hale's footsteps ahead of me, steady and sure, and I pushed through the pain, the crisp leaves cracking beneath my weight. We had no choice but to seek refuge among them, to forge an alliance, a fragile thread woven into the fabric of survival. Together, we whispered our intentions into the night, our words mingling with the smoke of their fires, igniting hope against the encroaching darkness. Just then, a howl split the silence, a bone-chilling sound that ricocheted through the trees. "They're close!" Hale's voice was sharp, cutting through my thoughts. In that moment, every heartbeat felt like a countdown, an invincible clock ticking away the seconds until the inevitable. It was a reminder that every decision came with a cost, every alliance a weight. I remembered the stories of the tribes, of the alliances forged in blood and fire, each pact steeped in history and sacrifice. They had survived, adapting, their culture melding with the land like shadows at dusk. "Trust them, but never forget," the elders had said. "They are as fierce as the storm and as unpredictable." I could feel the air electric with tension as we reached the edge of the clearing, the faint glow of the campfire flickering in the distance. The faces of the tribespeople emerged from the shadows, their eyes like embers, full of life and caution. I felt the weight of their gaze, each pair a judgment, an unspoken question hanging in the air: would we be allies or enemies? "Hale!" I hissed, feeling the pull of panic rising like bile in my throat. "What if they don't want us here?" Hale turned to me, his expression resolute, but I could see the flicker of doubt behind his bravado. "We don't have a choice. We need them." The fire crackled, a heartbeat in the silence, and as we stepped forward, the shadows shifted, swirling around us like ghosts. I could feel the pulse of the earth beneath my feet, a reminder that everything, every secret, every betrayal, lay just below the surface. Suddenly, a figure stepped forward from the shadows, her hair cascading like a river of night. She was fierce, her eyes cutting through the darkness like shards of glass. "You tread on sacred ground," she said, her voice low and melodic. "What brings you to our home?" Hale's grip tightened on his sword, his bravado wavering as he faced her. "We seek refuge. We can help." But the weight of history loomed large between us, thick and suffocating. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, the calculation, the memories of past betrayals playing out like a film across her face. The air crackled with unspoken words, tension weaving through the moment like a thread, binding us yet pulling us apart. "Help," she echoed, her voice sharp as a blade. "And what will you offer in return?" Trust is not given, it is earned. I could feel the heat rising, the pressure of expectation swirling around us. I remembered everything we were fighting for, the weight of our past, the dreams we carried like fragile glass. The howl of the night echoed again, the sound of danger creeping closer, the realization that time was slipping through our fingers like sand. It was a haunting reminder that we were not alone, that the darkness we sought to escape was a living thing, hungry and relentless. I stepped forward, drawing on the courage I didn't know I had. We are not your enemies. We are just lost. My voice trembled, but it rang with truth, raw and unfiltered. We seek a place to stand, a chance to breathe. The woman narrowed her eyes, weighing my words against the chaos that chased us, and for a moment, the world held its breath. Would she see us as allies or ghosts? Would we find sanctuary in her gaze, or would her judgment seal our fate? Silence enveloped us, a fragile cocoon, and in that moment, I could feel the shifting tides of fate. Everything hung in the balance, our lives, our dreams, our desperate hope for a tomorrow. And as the darkness pressed in, I realized one undeniable truth: escape routes and safe havens were not just places on a map, they were forged in the hearts of those willing to fight against the tide, to ally with the shadows, and to reclaim the light. The night whispered secrets, the forest held its breath, and the shadows danced between us, waiting, watching. The wind howled like a wounded beast as the ship rocked violently, tossing its crew like rag dolls. The ocean, dark and churning, a leviathan with a hunger for souls. I gripped the railing, my heart racing, the salt spray mixing with the sweat on my brow. In the chaos, I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me, 1,000 tragedies, 1,000 triumphs, each wave a whisper of those who'd come before me. I remember the stories my father told me as a child. Tales of Marco Polo, who once rode across the Silk Road like a comet blazing through the night. I could almost see him, his eyes bright with wonder, his heart full of dreams. But dreams come at a price. With each storm that lashed against our vessel, I felt that price inch closer, threatening to claim me as its own. And there was Isabella, the merchant's daughter, standing beside me, her face pale yet resolute, eyes that shimmered like stars on the brink of dawn. "Do you think we'll make it?" she shouted over the thunderous roar of the waves, her voice trembling yet fierce. "I have to believe we will," I replied, though doubt clawed at my insides like a ravenous beast. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of failing her, of sinking into the abyss with nothing but regrets to keep me company. Isabella had left everything behind for this journey, the safety of her father's bustling marketplace, the laughter of friends, the dreams of a future. A future that now hung precariously in the balance as the ship pitched violently, like an actor in an endless tragedy. A flash of lightning illuminated the deck, and in that moment, I caught a glimpse of the captain, his face twisted in determination and fear. He was a man of the sea, hardened by years of navigating storms both literal and metaphorical, yet even he now faltered, eyes wide with the realization of what lay ahead. I remember the tales of the old sailors," I murmured, swallowed by the cacophony around me. "They spoke of monsters lurking beneath the waves. Do you think they're real?" Isabella shook her head, a smile breaking through her fear, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Monsters are real, but they're not always what we expect. Sometimes, they wear the faces of those we trust." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. It was a lesson learned too late for many, a realization that trust can carve wounds deeper than any blade. The ship lurched again, and I stumbled, feeling the fire of panic ignite in my veins. Then came the silence. A profound, eerie stillness that blanketed the night. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. And then, a scream. A man, thrown overboard like a discarded doll, swallowed by the raging sea. I felt a part of my soul go with him, lost in the depths. The shadows of those who had traveled before us flickered at the edges of my mind, their fates entwined with ours. I could almost hear their whispers echoing in the wind, "Remember us. Remember our stories." Suddenly, we were all faced with the abyss of our own hearts. I could see it in the eyes of the crew, the flickering hope extinguished one by one. I felt it in Isabella's grasp, tightening around my wrist as she pulled me closer, anchoring herself to me as if I could offer safety. "Don't let go," she pleaded, the fear in her voice raw and genuine, like the sharp edge of a blade. "I won't," I promised, but the weight of the ocean pressed down, an invisible hand dragging us toward despair. And then the storm broke. Not in a crescendo but a whisper, a singular moment of clarity amidst the chaos. The waves roared their fury, but I felt a strange calm wash over me. The sea was a reflection of our journey, each wave a trial, each crest a triumph. Would we rise, or would we succumb to the depths? In the heart of the storm, everything I had ever wanted came crashing down. I thought of Marco Polo's adventures, how he had braved the unknown, faced his fears, and returned transformed. Yet how many had been lost along the way? How many dreams had been drowned in the depths of the ocean? "Isabella," I said, forcing the words out through the storm's din, "what if we never see land again?" She turned to me, and in that moment, I saw it, the flicker of hope, of life, even in the shadow of death. "Then we make our own destiny, even in the depths," she whispered, steely resolve shining through her fear. A moment stretched. A heartbeat. Then, the ship lurched violently again. I felt the world tilt, and we were thrown as the ghost of the ocean reached for us. But it was not just the storm around us, it was the storm within. The fates of explorers past danced through my mind, each one a ghost whispering their tales of triumph and tragedy. Kublai Khan's emissaries, the endless deserts, the shadowy jungles, they had all tasted the bitter fruit of ambition. I thought of the fabled riches they had sought, and the darkness that often claimed them. As the ship creaked and groaned beneath the weight of the tempest, I realized that our fear, our struggle, and our joy were stitched into the fabric of the world. We were part of something greater, bound by the desire to seek, to find, to grasp the horizon even as it eluded us. A bolt of lightning cracked the sky open, illuminating Isabella's determined face. "Hold on," she screamed, and I felt time slow, the cosmos around us hanging in a delicate balance, teetering on the edge of fate. In that moment, I knew that the outcome of our voyage, the echoes of our names, would ripple through time. Whether we found land or lost ourselves to the deep, the stories would continue, passed on like sacred memories. And with that thought, I took a deep breath and held her tighter. The storm raged on, but my heart surged with a fierce defiance. We would write our own fate, encased in the heart of the storm, where hope and despair danced endlessly, and the whispers of countless travelers lingered, waiting to be heard. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing: we were not alone. We were part of the great tapestry, woven through time, stitched with dreams and drenched in the salt of the sea. And as the ship spiraled through the tempest, I could feel the weight of their stories folding into ours, an eternal echo that would never fade. The market was alive with a cacophony of shouts, the stench of spices mingling with the tang of sweat. I stood in the shadow of towering silk banners, each one whispering the dreams of distant lands, but my heart pounded for a different reason. The sun set low, casting long silhouettes across the stalls, and in that moment, I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes on my back. My name is Jean. I am neither a merchant nor a noblewoman, but a simple trader with a past weighed down by choices, secrets, and the sharp edges of survival. "Jean, do you have the silks?" A voice cut through the noise, urgent and raw. It was my closest friend, but today she was frantic, her eyes wide and filled with unshed tears. I could smell the fear rolling off her like a thick fog. She had traveled far from her village, crossing paths with danger at every turn. "I have what I could get," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor of my heart. The bundles of silk were hidden beneath my tattered cloak, each thread a fragment of hope in a world that demanded we sell our very souls to the highest bidder. "But we need to hurry. What if they find us?" Her voice trembled, cracking under the pressure of unspoken threats. Mai was not just any trader, she was the daughter of a silk weaver, a girl with dreams entangled in the very fabric of the Silk Road. But dreams don't feed families, and the wolves of trade leave no room for the weak. "Then we run," I murmured, scanning the crowded marketplace. Shadows darted between stalls, cloaked figures moving with purpose. I felt their eyes on me, like needles stitching my fate into the very ground we stood upon. They were men with power, men who saw women as nothing more than pawns to be moved in their game of commerce. As we hurried through the stalls, a memory clawed at the edges of my mind, the laughter of children playing in the fields back home. I remembered the day my father taught us to weave. Each thread is a story, he said, his hand skillful, his voice warm. But now, we were weaving the story of our survival, each strand an echo of desperation. Suddenly, a shout rang out. "Stop them!" A man, tall and imposing, finger pointed like a dagger. My heart stuttered. I turned to Mai, and in that fleeting instant, I saw the reflection of my own fear in her eyes, two hearts drumming to the same frantic beat as the world around us blurred. "Run!" I shouted, adrenaline igniting my limbs. We sprinted down narrow alleys, the rough cobblestones bruising our feet. Fear was a living thing, wrapping its tendrils around my throat, choking my resolve. We darted into a shadowy passageway, breathless, the darkness swallowing us whole. In the silence, the air thick with tension, I felt the weight of our choices. The Silk Road was a pathway forged through pain and triumph, but it was also a graveyard of lost hopes. Women like us, trading not just goods but the very essence of ourselves, sacrificing safety for survival, dreams for despair. We were the unsung heroines, navigating this treacherous web, our contributions hidden beneath layers of history. "Do you remember when we used to dream?" Mai's voice broke the silence, a soft whisper that trembled with nostalgia. "About the places we would go." "Every night," I replied, my heart aching with the memory. "But we never imagined it would be like this." Her laughter was hollow. "I thought the Silk Road was a golden path, but it feels more like a noose." And how true that was. Women were the silent architects of trade, we stitched the fabric of connection between empires, yet we remained invisible, as if our very existence was a mere footnote in the chronicles of history. We were the ones who bartered wisdom for silk, who exchanged spices for the stories of distant lands, yet our faces remained shadowed, our names forgotten. A sudden noise outside shattered our reverie, men's voices, angry, searching. My pulse quickened. "We need to move," I urged, but Mai's gaze was fixed on the ground, lost in thought. "What if we could change that?" she whispered, the fire of rebellion igniting in her eyes. "What if we could make them see us?" A dangerous idea flickered to life between us, a fragile spark in the overwhelming darkness. But with the idea came fear. "Mai, they won't listen," I said, shaking my head, feeling the weight of our reality crushing down. "They want us silent. They want us invisible." "But what if we spoke?" she insisted, her voice rising with determination. "What if we told our stories?" I wanted to believe, wanted to grasp at the straws of hope, but the suffocating dread held me back. The shadows were closing in, the hounds of trade relentless. By some twisted design of fate, our lives had been entwined in the fabric of this road, woven together, yet frayed at the edges. I remembered the way Mai's father used to weave, fingers deftly crafting something beautiful. "We are threads," I said, "but some threads are cut, while others are left to dangle." "Then let us weave a new tapestry," she replied, her eyes fierce. "Let us be the threads that stand out." And as we emerged from the shadows, the world around us felt pregnant with possibility, yet heavy with the threat of danger. The path before us was lined with uncertainty, but we held onto the flicker of hope like a candle in the vast expanse of night. The voices grew louder, the shadows deeper, yet my heart surged with the desire to be seen. This journey was not just ours, it was every woman who had ever walked this road, every girl who dared to dream amidst the chaos. In the distance, a clock tower chimed, echoing through the marketplace, a reminder that time was slipping away. "Jean, are you ready?" Mai's voice trembled with anticipation. The moment hung in the air, taut and electric, as we took a step toward the light, ready to challenge the darkness that sought to consume us. And just like that, the world around us held its breath, the Silk Road awaited our next move, the echoes of our existence hanging in the balance, waiting to be woven into a new history. The clock struck midnight, echoing through the quiet streets like a warning bell. All around, the city lay bathed in an eerie glow, the silence heavy with unspoken fears and undreamt hopes. I stood there, heart pounding, the weight of the world on my shoulders, my breath visible in the cold air. Above me, the stars flickered like old film frames, fragments of stories long forgotten but still stirring in the depths of my mind. Each twinkle beckoned like a ghost, whispering tales of journeys fraught with peril, loss, and the relentless march of progress. Maya was racing against time, her heart caught in a vice between duty and desire. She tightened the straps on her backpack, every creak of the fabric a reminder of the burden she carried. The city's newest transport system hummed beneath her feet, a sleek, metallic serpent of innovation, weaving through the alleys like a promise of freedom. But for every leap forward, she felt the heavy chains of her past pulling her back, memories of her father's voice fading into the clamor of the train's engine. "Don't forget where you came from," he used to say, his words a bittersweet melody now lost in the chaos of the city's heartbeat. Then, there was Leo, his pulse racing in sync with hers, a flickering flame of hope in a world that had grown dark. He clutched his phone, its screen illuminating his face, eyes darting across maps and coordinates like a soldier preparing for battle. The GPS was their lifeline, a digital compass guiding them through the labyrinth of steel and glass, but beneath the surface, he felt the gut-wrenching pull of uncertainty. Relationships, like journeys, could veer off course in the blink of an eye, and every ping of a notification felt like a reminder of the choices that had led them here, a crossroads of technology and humanity, where every decision held the weight of destiny. "I remember the old ways," he shouted over the roar of the train, desperation mixing with the exhilaration pulsing through his veins. "When you followed the stars, not a screen." He wanted to believe that the past was a guiding light, but the truth was a haunting shadow, and every map laid out before him felt like a trap. Maya's heart ached for him, the fierce light in his eyes a reflection of her own struggles. She longed to reach out, to bridge the chasm between their fears and aspirations, but the relentless pace of the train, the clattering of the wheels, drowned out her thoughts. Communication, once an intimate exchange of words and gestures, had become a flurry of texts and emojis, a disjointed dance that left them both longing for connection, yet trapped in their own silos of silence. And then the lights flickered, a warning, a premonition. The train shuddered, and the unsettling screech of metal against metal echoed through the car, a sound so visceral it made her stomach churn. Passengers screamed, some clutching their phones, others crying out for loved ones, echoes of humanity swirling in a digital storm. The innovation meant to ease their journey, to shorten the distance between them, now felt like a cruel joke, a betrayal. She closed her eyes, images flashing through her mind, the moments that had led her here, the dreams that had been lost in the chase for progress. "Maya!" Leah's voice broke through her reverie, but it was tinged with panic. She opened her eyes to find him reaching for her, his hand outstretched like a lifeline, the world around them spiraling into chaos. The train lurched violently, a beast thrashing against its chains, and she felt the ground beneath her feet shift, reality bending, warping. "I remember when I thought technology would save us," she yelled back, voice raw with emotion. "But it feels like it's consuming us instead." Her own words echoed in her ears, a confession she had never meant to vocalize. A tremor of fear coursed through her, and the very air felt electric, charged with the weight of unspoken truths. As the train screeched to a halt, the world outside was swallowed by darkness, illuminated only by the glow of emergency lights dancing like specters on the walls. Maya's heart raced, a drumbeat pounding in her ears as she turned to Leo, searching for solace in his gaze. But all she saw was the reflection of her own terror. They were lost in a sea of technology that promised connection but delivered isolation, a dissonance that rang louder than any siren. The door slid open, revealing the chaos outside, people spilling onto the platform, frantic faces illuminated by the glow of their devices, a sea of bodies moving as one, yet so painfully alone. Communication had turned into a cacophony, everyone broadcasting their fears and hopes, yet no one truly listening. It was a world of noise that drowned out the soul, and Maya felt suffocated, trapped between what was real and what was a mere illusion. "Let's go!" Leo shouted, pulling her into the crowd, their bodies weaving through the throng. Every step felt heavy with significance, a reminder that each moment mattered, each choice could lead them closer or further apart. "I remember when journeys meant something," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper against the din. "When they were about the people, not the machines." And as they plunged into the chaos of the station, the ghosts of their pasts trailing behind, the weight of progress pressed down on them, an invisible hand squeezing their hearts. The city, once a beacon of hope, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows, technology a double-edged sword, a promise of light casting long, haunting shadows. The confrontation loomed ahead, a reckoning that felt inevitable. Their connection, once electric, now crackled with uncertainty, but amidst the turmoil, a flicker of determination ignited within Maya. She wouldn't let the ghosts of innovation consume them. Not now. Not ever. And as they danced through the chaos, the pulse of the city thudding beneath their feet, the journey was far from over, it had merely begun. The dust hangs thick in the air, a choking haze that wraps around the marketplace like a long, lost ghost. It clings to the corners of the eyes and scratches at the throat, a reminder of what was traded and what was lost. Merchants shout hoarse bargains, their voices rising and falling like a sickly sweet melody, but all I hear is the heartbeat of a city that refuses to forget. I stand amidst the chaos, a figure lost in a sea of humanity, yet tethered to an unseen force, one that stretches back through centuries, binding me to a tapestry woven with silk and blood, dreams, and despair. The first figure that haunts me is Amir, a trader with eyes like darkened pools, reflecting every flicker of hope and despair that passes through his soul. He stands at the threshold of his stall, fingers grazing the fine fabrics of the East. Each thread tells a story, whispers secrets of the journeys taken, of caravans that braved the blistering sun and bone-chilling nights. But today, his brow is furrowed deeper than the creases of his wares. A rival merchant's shadow looms, a reminder that loyalty is a fickle mistress, and betrayal is merely a heartbeat away. I remember the first time I felt the thrill of a trade, he murmurs, almost to himself, as if the memory itself might break the grip of dread tightening around his heart. It was like holding the world in my hands, a silken scarf, a perfect shape, a promise whispered in the folds. His voice is barely above a whisper, yet it cuts through the clamor, piercing the chaos around him. But that promise, I think, is stained with the ink of greed, and I can feel that familiar pang of sorrow creeping in. Then there's Layla, her spirit as fierce as the desert sun, yet her heart draped in shadows. She's a scholar, a keeper of stories, and a seeker of truths. I remember the first book I held, she says, her voice steady yet trembling with the weight of longing. The pages were worn, the ink faded, but the words, they danced. Her laughter, light and fragile, lingers in the air like smoke, a haunting reminder of what beauty can emerge from despair. Yet, beneath that laughter lies a tempest, a struggle against a world that values trade over tales, commerce over culture. Do you ever wonder, she asks, eyes shimmering with unshed tears, what we lose in this race for wealth? What fragments of ourselves we leave behind? The air grows heavy with her words, a tension that wraps around us like the very silk we yearn to barter. I catch a glimpse of her longing, and it mirrors my own. In a world that prizes gold and conquest, the stories, oh, the stories, remain buried like treasures forgotten in the sand. And so we stand, three souls caught in the whirlwind of history, each tethered to the legacy of this ancient trade route. The Silk Road, they call it, but it feels more like a scar running across the earth, a reminder of the wounds inflicted by ambition and desire. Histories intertwine, cultures collide, and every interaction leaves a mark, an indelible stain on the fabric of time. I watch as Amir's fingers tremble over a piece of jade, a remnant of the East. This is more than a trinket, he says, voice low, yet laced with intensity. It's a promise of peace, of connection. It speaks of the bonds forged between our peoples. But there's a tremor in his voice that betrays him, an unspoken fear that the very connections he cherishes could unravel at any moment. Betrayal, after all, lurks in the shadows, a spectre waiting to strike. Layla's gaze travels the crowd, eyes narrowing as she observes the tangled web of exchanges. It's a dance, isn't it? A precarious ballet of power and influence, she muses, a bitter smile gracing her lips. But what happens when the music stops? When the notes fade, and we're left with silence? There is an edge to her voice, a rawness that lingers in the air, a palpable tension that tangles in the throat like a noose. She's not just a scholar, she's a prophet of a future where the weight of trade bears down like a yoke on the collective soul. The marketplace pulses, thundering with urgency as the sun dips lower in the sky, casting long shadows that threaten to swallow us whole. Tension crackles like lightning in the air. It's as if the universe itself holds its breath, waiting for the moment when it all collides. Amir's rival steps forward, dark and brooding, a wolf in the guise of a man. The air thickens with anticipation, every heartbeat echoes, a relentless reminder of the stakes at play. I remember, Amir whispers, the moment I knew this would be more than just trade. I knew it would be war. The shadows close in, and I feel the weight of his words pressing down on us, like the very silk that binds our fates. Layla's breaths quicken, her eyes darting between the tension that thrums in the air, her heart races, mirroring the chaos around her. Then, it happens, a clash, a scream, a cascade of color and sound, and suddenly the world erupts into chaos. The marketplace turns on itself, a frenzy of fists and shouts, of desperation and despair. I can barely breathe, can barely think, as if the very fabric of time is unraveling beneath me. I watch Amir and Layla, their faces illuminated in the firelight of conflict, their lives entwined in ways they cannot yet fathom. The legacy of the Silk Road is not just a tale of trade, it's a testament to the fragility of connection, the fierce power of culture, and the relentless pursuit of ambition. Every face, every story, bleeds into the next, a tapestry woven with threads of hope and fear. In that moment, as chaos reigns, I realize we are not merely witnesses, we are participants in a story that stretches far beyond our understanding, a story that echoes through time, whispered in the winds of the past. In the heart of that marketplace, where shadows dance and dreams collide, I understand that our legacies are written with every choice we make, every bond we forge, every betrayal we endure. And as the darkness descends, as the air thickens with uncertainty, I can't help but feel that this is just the beginning, an echo of the past that resonates in the present, a haunting reminder of the stories yet to be told, waiting to unfold like a delicate piece of silk.